All right, welcome to the Remedial Film Class podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Dan.
And I'm Travis.
And I'm George.
We are getting together to discuss movies that we have all seen.
But our friend George, for whatever reason, has not. And we mean
Right.
everybody out there except for George.
Like every movie everybody has ever seen except for George. So we're going to try to figure out what movies he has seen and then what movies he has not seen. And we are going to break his stones about these great classics that he has not seen.
George, you are aware of the structure of movies. You knew that they existed, but you really haven't seen very many. And the ones you did see, you may not remember. Well, it brings me to this question, George. Have you ever seen Bob Zemeckis' Back to the Future?
Don't hurt me. Don't hurt me.
No.
Oh,
No, this movie was the straw that broke the camel's back. because we've had this conversation before, me and Travis, and me and you, Dan, about movies. And I just, at some point I said, stop, because, this is going to be a podcast. Let's save our reactions for the podcast, right? And we said that for, how long have I been saying that for? 2 years?
With me, a lot longer.
There was a day about 2 weeks ago. Dan, I don't even remember what you said to me. I stopped and said, yeah, I haven't seen that. And you were like, what? And I was like, this madness has to end.
It has to end.
So yeah, this movie I have not seen. And like I said, this is the straw that broke the camel's back. I need to watch this movie. And if I'm going to watch this movie, might as well do a podcast about it.
This is a good start.
so there we are. Episode 1 of the Remedial Film Class podcast is going to be George tackling the original Back to the Future. Now, before we let you go watch the movie, we have to ask, George, what do you know about this movie?
I am hip. So, I get the references, like, on social media and whatnot. I do know that, what is it, a DeLorean involved?
There's a DeLorean.
With flux capacitor, which is funny because I know what flux and capacitors do. And they don't time travel, but this
one does.
88 miles an hour. They have to go into the future, right? Because there was a hoverboard involved. They have to go to the past because they hadn't heard Chuck Berry yet. I don't even know if that's the first. I don't even know if that's the first movie.
Well, you're playing around with a movie that has been around for 30 plus years. So and it's been part of basically our culture. So you are going to mix a few things from all three movies, but mainly we're going to be dealing with just the first one.
Okay. I couldn't tell you the plot of the first movie.
Right.
I'm sure I've seen it, like scenes here and there. It's been on TV, but I couldn't tell you.
Can you tell me why it's called Back to the Future? Because if you go back, wouldn't you be going to the past?
Just off the top of my head, could you have overshot the runway and went too far?
I feel like
I don't know.
Quote from Seven here, where John Doe says, "I feel I should tell you something, but I don't want to ruin the surprise." So that's how I feel right now, because there's so much. Like, I watched it today, and I just,
it's as great as you remember.
It holds up. It definitely holds up, and it's a near perfect movie. But I don't want to skew what you feel, because you could watch it and be like, "This is crap," which I doubt you'll say. But you just never know. Like, there's just so much nostalgia in that movie. It was made in 1985. I was 10 years old. I remember vividly that time of my life. So, yeah, for somebody who's watching it for the first time, they might not have that kind of nostalgia, but you might fall in love with it. It might become your favorite movie. We don't know.
Or, and not to play devil's advocate because I can't stand those guys, but, and keep in mind, I was also made in 1985, so I've always felt a connection to this movie. And I can remember basically every year of my childhood watching a taped off TV version of this, 1992 until I got it on DVD, right? Every couple of months watching this movie, playing with my action figures as a kid. Love this movie. It's in my DNA. But I have a problem with this movie. A big problem. And I'm not going to bring it up now. We'll save that for part 2. But
I did say it was near perfect.
I have one really, really big issue with this movie. But the rest of it's great.
Well, I mean, we all do that. We find something in a movie and we're like, wow, how did that happen?
This is a pretty
How did
big
that-"
issue, though. Oh,
Is it? Okay.
Big time.
I can't wait.
but the rest of it is so good.
I guess that's my homework then.
Okay, so here's what we're going to do, class. Everybody that wants to, go check out that movie. You might want to pause right here because we're going to cut to part 2 pretty soon. In real life, George is going to go stream Back to the Future, and he's gonna love it. But how much is he gonna love it?
I'm gonna
Right.
take it in
Yeah. I'm excited.
finally.
Let's get to work. Well, George, you did it.
I did.
You completed it.
I did.
You finished it.
I did.
You did the thing.
You're my special boy.
Just like a half an hour ago. For the first
All
time,
right.
I watched this. I watched
What did you
the
watch?
movie, Back to the Future,
Back to
Yeah.
the Future. Nice.
for the first time ever.
First time ever. And what?
Yep.
It's 2020? 2020?
2020.
Yep.
It came out in 1985.
So you're 35 years late, but
Welcome
All
to the
right.
club. You get the bumper sticker on the way out.
you thought that was great. Just wait till you hear hair metal.
Yeah, way to catch up. I'm going to tell you about a band named Poison. they're new, I
He's-
think.
He's not ready for that yet.
Not ready for
But his
Poison.
kids are going to love it.
His kids are going to love it.
I get that.
Hey. So
an
George,
hour ago, I wouldn't have got that.
Yeah, there's so many references he's now going to get.
we have to hear it.
Now, we're not going to interrupt him, right? We're just going to let him either gush or massacre our dreams, and then we'll talk about it. Then we'll debate.
Exactly.
Okay.
This is your forum, George. We are going to step back, stop rambling, and let you tell us about this movie you just saw.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, you don't get very far into the movie before you realize, or at least before I realized why it's called that. But like they pretty much set it up, pretty obviously. Like, he had to get out of there. He was, he only had one vial of plutonium. Like, he wasn't coming back. I mean, obviously, he was going to try and get back. So that's why it's Back to the Future.
So you're saying you approve of the title of the movie?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's a start.
Yeah, I lived my entire life thinking that both like Doc and Marty went together.
Okay.
I had no idea
Oh, great.
that it was just Marty that took the trip. Right there, I was like, okay, well, everything I think I know about this movie is wrong,
Mhm.
which was cool because I wasn't sure how surprised I was going to be because it's everywhere, but luckily I was.
It's always good to be surprised.
So I guess fast forward to you get that feeling in your stomach when his mom's coming onto him. You're like,
A little icky. It's a little icky.
Yeah.
Yeah. 'Cause
So kind of like, but you know what it was like? It reminded me of an episode of Seinfeld.
yes.
Like where like things are going wrong and like they just keep getting worse and you're just along for the ride, but you get that like knot in your stomach like, oh God.
yeah, and then
That's what that was like.
the ultimate twist is like the whole space-time continuum where you're erasing your own future.
Oh yeah.
So that makes it tense.
Yeah. Yeah, as soon as like he pushed his dad out of the way of the car, I was like, oh shit, here goes. Like yeah, Yeah, it played out exactly how I thought it would after that. Instead of it being his dad who falls in love with instead of her falling in love with George
Mhm.
McFly, she falls in love with Marty, and you're like, and I just knew it was gonna happen, like that, because
Right.
she told the story, and you're like, okay, well, it's a parallel story, but you change the person who gets hit by the car. That's what happens,
Changes everything.
right?
And then that's why Doc flips out the whole movie
Right.
when he's like, you can't do that because this and this and this. And he's right. And
Right.
what's funny is when I watched it recently, I thought to myself, the theme of time starts from the very beginning. And I totally forgot about that. The whole opening scene with the clocks and then Marty's late and, Doc his whole experiment was that all the clocks at once were going to be 25 minutes late, which made him late, and he's always late. But to me, the word I wrote down was foreshadowing. Like the whole first 20 minutes is just foreshadowing for everything else that's going to happen. But the foreshadowing does not stop until the credits roll. Like the whole time they're telling you this means something.
Yeah.
And when you watch it again, you're going to realize how much they set up.
Yeah.
And you're going to go, oh my God.
Honestly, I planned on watching it multiple times before we recorded this. And I will. I'd be able to study the movie. But this was kind of like spur of the moment. Like I finished it and I texted you and you were like, I wish we could do it right now. I was like, let's do it right now.
Let's do it.
It's a pop quiz, man.
Yeah.
We're not looking at the midterm. This is a pop quiz on Back to the Future.
Yeah.
Not even open book.
So getting back to the how the past affects the future and all that jazz. Like, you see the signs for the politician who's running for mayor, right? And and then like, when he runs into that guy and he's sweeping the floor in the diner, and it's kind of like, well, would he even have been running for mayor if he didn't run into Marty?
Right.
Like
Mayor.
You start cleaning the floors.
I mean, he had like big aspirations, but did he have that aspiration before he ran into Marty the time traveler? No.
So George, did you get the tab joke? Did that make any sense?
The tab joke?
The tab joke.
Probably
give me a tab.
not.
How can I give you a tab unless you buy something?
When he first appears in the
I remember
diner.
I remember the part, and he says, "How am I going to give you a tab if you don't buy something?"
Right. There's an old soda called
Tab. Okay.
But it's not old enough for a 1955 diner owner to know what a tab is because it's from like the 70s, 80s.
Okay.
Yeah, it was Diet Coca-Cola.
Right.
Actually, you can still buy it today. It's just called Coke Zero.
Coke Zero.
Right. Okay. All right, hold on.
So a tab is a brand of soda.
Hold on. So is that your big problem with the movie?
No, I love it.
Okay.
It ruined everything.
Growing up, my aunt was a big tab drinker. Somehow she found it up through the time of Coke Zero. Like she still had tab at her house, and I don't know.
Do you think that's what they meant when they wrote it? Like how?
Yeah, no. Tab was like a real like popular beverage in.
Yeah, but you don't have
it.
You don't have a tab unless you buy something.
So
Technically,
the diner owner knows
you
got
to order something before
he knows
you
a tab, like a bartender would know a tab.
Right.
Marty's from the 80s, so that's why he says.
Oh, so he asks for a tab.
He asks for a tab. Give me a tab. Well,
I thought he was asking to start a tab.
That's why I brought it up. I had a feeling.
Yeah. No, I didn't.
Yeah.
Totally
because then he
head.
says, "Well, give me a Pepsi free." And he's like, "You got.
Yeah,
you got to pay for it."
It went over my head. Yeah.
Just give me something without.
Just
sugar.
give me something without sugar.
Yeah.
And he gives him
coffee.
Or coffee. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, George is the milk drinker, not Marty.
No, so that went over my head.
Yeah, there's a lot of jokes in that movie that are specific to the 80s that when you kind of take for granted, because my kids wouldn't know what a tab was. Either tab. No. My kids don't know what a tab is, drink-wise and or, collection of orders to be paid for. They don't know either of those terms. How did you feel when you watched it? When it was over?
When it was over?
Yeah. What was your feeling?
Okay. All right. So when it was over, I know that Doc doesn't die.
Right.
Because there's Back to the Future 2 and 3.
Okay.
So I was wondering how that was going to work. How are we going to get Doc not to die?
Okay.
Right? And obviously he can go back, and he did exactly what I would have done, which is, set the clock sooner and get, and then as soon as you get to the parking lot, tell the guy, like, we got to get out of here. We can't do this right now. Right? Because I already went to the past and I'm back. Right? I wouldn't have thought of the fact that screws the whole thing up because now I'm in the same place twice.
Right.
And I didn't even think of that. But, they touched on that brilliantly. Mm-hmm. But then, when Doc wasn't dead and it was like, and he wore a bulletproof vest. I don't remember what the note said. It didn't say he was going to be shot, or he just said he was going to be killed by terrorists or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't remember what it said. But, I don't know. A vest really isn't like a guarantee. So, okay, he got lucky.
Yeah. I look at it as he probably, the tape on the letter looked very old. like as a comic book collector,
Mm-hmm.
I know what old Scotch tape looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're looking at 25 to 30 years on a piece of paper, taking on UV and all that stuff, it becomes brown and kind of crusty. And that letter looked like that. So I'm assuming that Doc taped that thing together pretty quickly after Marty left. So he had 30 years, 25 years to really think about that night and what was going to happen. And
did the letter specifically say? I don't recall. Did it specifically say on the night that I time traveled?
yes,
Okay.
on the night, and he mentions you will be gunned down by terrorists.
Okay. Well, it doesn't matter because I thought a part of me was like, well, I mean, it's kind of cheesy, but okay.
Right.
Yeah, Doc can't die, but I thought we could have thought of something better than that.
Right.
You know, something having to do with like actually solve the thing through time travel or like through the tools that we had.
Right.
Not like bring up the surprise tool like, oh, I wore a vest today because I did actually look at the note. And then the other thing I thought was, why the hell does he come back the next day? Why does he set the thing to come back to Marty the next day? And then he showed up in his driveway, but whatever.
I mean, he's got to know, Marty's got to see that sweet truck, because if he doesn't see that sweet truck, he's not going to want to help me by coming back to save his kids or whatever
That's
he says
true.
at the end there.
That is a sweet truck. I wanted that truck for years.
There were other things that I kind of, as soon as they happened, like when Biff knocked on the door instead of George, I was like, oh, well, I mean, George is on the way, and you know,
So
obviously
you caught on to the foreshadowing before, like,
oh, I knew
you
that
knew it was
George
coming.
had to stand up to Biff
Right.
at that point because otherwise Marty wouldn't, you know.
Exist.
Yeah, exactly. So knowing that Marty continues on after this movie, that has to work out in some way. So there's going to be a
Right.
confrontation between Biff and Marty's dad.
I think that
George.
foreshadowing was lazy on purpose because the real twist was not realizing how much. Because when Doc says, Marty comes up to him, he's like, "My dad stood up to Biff. He's
Yeah.
never done that before in his life."
He's like,
and
"In
then
his life?"
Doc's like, "In his life." So
And
he
he's like,
knew
yeah, that's going to change.
that's going to change
yeah.
things.
Mhm.
And I think that was the bigger reveal than Biff being stood up to. I think you saw that coming.
Oh yeah.
but the
and
bigger
no,
reveal-
it started. The cogs in my mind went
Right.
immediately when it was Biff knocking on the car. I was like, okay, George stands up to Biff. George and Biff's entire relationship from here on out is totally different.
Right.
Right. And how's that going to look?
Right.
In the future.
And that's again the foreshadowing. Like everything you watch in the beginning happens in the middle and happens in the end,
Mhm.
but it all happens differently.
Yeah.
But so familiar that you're like, I know he's gonna
It's
do this.
It's beautiful.
Yeah,
It really
it's
is.
very well written. I
Yeah,
think.
I liked it a lot.
But I do wonder, and I worry that because you know that there are later parts,
Yeah.
that you missed out on that emotional response where you go, oh God, their entire plan is ruined, and George is a dead man, right?
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
you're supposed to have that moment of like, oh no, and because you knew there were sequels,
Right.
I think your initial reaction was, oh, that's clever,
But they're gonna get out of it.
because they're gonna get out of it.
Right.
Well, I don't know. I watch movies today like that. Like, oh, this is the main character. They're not gonna die.
No,
You
that's
know?
true.
Unless they're on The Walking Dead or something.
You've
They're not
really
gonna die.
gotta. That's okay. So that can be some of your homework for next week. Try to watch the movie like a human being.
But what's funny is that when you watch it again, you're gonna catch a lot of the things that you're not mentioning right now.
Mhm.
But you're gonna realize how genius some of it is, and after we hear what Dan's problem is, I'll be able to either eat crow or not. But I personally think it's almost perfect. I think there's some things that could be fixed,
Mhm.
but for being a 30-plus-year-old movie, it still holds up. It's still relevant. It's dated, but it's dated purposely.
Mhm.
Like that whole 50s. I sat and watched that one time with my dad, and that was my dad's life. So he graduated high school in 65. So that was kind of his life. And when he's watching it, he's seeing the cars, he's seeing the attitudes, and he knew people like Biff. He probably was Biff, as far as I know. Like
Yeah.
he knew people like George. He probably put people like George in lockers. Like he watched that movie from a different nostalgia than I watched it.
Sure.
Because I'm watching it as a kid from the 80s, And he's watching it as a kid from the 60s, and we're both having the same experience.
Yeah.
But for different reasons.
Yeah.
And now that I just watched it with my kids at 45, I know my kids are not catching half the stuff that is in that movie, but they still enjoy it. Like my son is enjoying the skateboard stuff.
Well, you have to make them understand.
Right. So it's, but they know their pop-up, so they know that time period. And I'm very good at making sure that they understand history and nostalgia, why things are nostalgic and why they live on forever. And that kind of movie does that because, you think of movies like Goonies and, Stand By Me, whatever, like they tap into people's childhood.
Yeah, absolutely.
So even if you're 70, you're watching this movie as a kid. And I think that's why that movie works in so many levels, because it's not playing just in my nostalgia, but it's playing on my dad's and my grandfather. They see the principal, and the principal hasn't changed in 30 years.
Yep.
The school's clean. They show it in the beginning with graffiti all over it. They've really captured the 50s, even with Chuck Berry's and Marvin Berry's band.
His cousin. Yeah.
His cousin.
Or whatever, yeah.
And
his cousin, right?
That whole dance feel, like everything just clicked.
I agree. I can't believe that I'm as old as I am and that I just watched that. I cannot believe it. It's crazy.
I wanted to mention that this movie has a particular kind of value that you don't find in a lot of media. I mean, you can find it here and there in timepieces, Happy Days, that 70s show, because they come out at a time that they affect the youth who are watching these products, but they're always geared just as much to the parents of those children. And so you get this interesting intergenerational like melding where suddenly, you and your parents can see eye to eye. It's a really interesting, it's like a valuable art versus a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about where it's just for fun and entertainment. But it's one of those things when you're a kid, I don't know that you register like the ick factor of the mom because you're just like, oh, that's so silly. She doesn't know that's her son. And then when you're an adolescent or a teenager, you register the ick factor. But for the first time, you see your parents and there's a certain like bond there because it's like, oh my gosh, they went through the same thing and I just never had to see it.
Yeah,
Thank
almost
goodness
like, oh, you were
I
my
didn't
age.
have to see it.
You've told me that 100 times. I've been your age, but you actually have been.
Oh God, you were this age. You did this. Oh no, your life was complicated too.
And it also plays off of Marty's interpretation of his parents. Like they talk about how his mother wouldn't do this, wouldn't do that because she wouldn't allow him to do stuff, and then she winds up being a bit of a
she obviously was the one that came on to George,
and they touch on that really like early. Like you realize, oh my God, she's boy crazy.
Yeah,
that's why she fell in love with George, because she falls in love with whatever is crossing her path at that moment.
Yes,
whatever she's emotionally connected to.
Yeah, and he's stuck. It's really interesting.
That's another thing I was thinking when I was watching. I was like, if they're going to go to that dance together, he's got to convince her to ask him to go to that dance together. That's how this is going to get solved.
Yeah, I love the whole, how he gets George to get on board. I said to the boys when we were watching, I was like, you do watch this movie knowing that everything you're seeing is for a reason. Like every single piece of this movie is done for the future scenes. So it's all that's the premise, is foreshadowing. So if you see him wearing something, it's going to come up later why he's wearing it. And when he's wearing that Fallout suit, you don't know that he's going to wear it and try to portray an alien. Right. But it comes up like 3 times. It's on the covers of the magazine, on the comic books. It's on the magazine he's reading before he falls asleep. It's on the Weird Stories comic book cover. Like all that stuff, huge in the 50s. Science fiction. Yeah. H.G. Wells stuff. So to play into that and then do the Darth Vader thing and,
I thought
and
that was
Vulcan,
funny too.
it's like he's going to, why would you use those names? He's going to be older, and you would think George, once Star Wars came out in 1977, George McFly would be like, Darth Vader?
Yeah, exactly.
What the Did he have the same dream I had?
I love how guitar heavy the movie is. Like from the jump, it's just like, every guitarist is Marty. He's
Right.
our
Can
avatar.
I tell you how much I identify with Marty? I was literally sketching on a car last week.
That's
With
why
my
I thought
kids.
you would like
Awesome.
it, because
Yeah.
he's you.
I play the guitar. I sketched on on cars on my skateboard.
Yeah.
It was funny. I was thinking really like critically when I was first watching the movie, and I was like, when the car turns and he comes off of it,
Right.
like he should be going a lot faster. And he like comes off the car and he immediately starts pushing the skateboard. I'm like, wow, his bearings really suck in that skateboard. And then like the next scene, he drives it into a puddle, and I'm like, that's why his bearings suck.
They're rusty.
I was like, they even addressed that. No, I'm just playing. But yeah, it is guitar heavy, and that's one of the reasons I guess why I identify with Marty a little bit.
So, Dan, are we ready to go into your issues
Yeah,
with it?
I want to
or-
get into.
I
to
really
Dan's.
don't want to ruin this movie for you guys, but I've got a serious concern.
I don't think you're
Okay.
going to ruin it.
So
I'll walk off the set.
So Marty has no idea, right, that he's about to head back to 1955.
Right.
He ends up there in a pinch, and he's presented with a very, very awkward problem. Just to summarize, his mom wants to do him, and he needs his dad to do his mom so that he can exist.
Mm-hmm.
But for his dad to do his mom, he's got to dodge his mom and let her hit the dad. Okay? It's like a gravitational situation here. And his plan A, right? Not plan B, not plan Z, not, oh God, plan A is scrapped and now we've got to think on our feet. No. His plan,
I know where you're going with
plan A is he's going to molest his mom.
this. Right.
Plan A. Hey, I know what I'll do. I'm going to molest my mom. It's one of those things. It's one of those things where you have politicians who have like their one, like really the issue that makes them really mad.
Right.
And then every problem that comes up, their solution to it is to take care of that thing that makes them mad. Right? Whether it's border control or any number of hot button issues on either side. It's like, oh, hey, too much money in the budget. Let's do border control. Hey, not enough money in the budget. Border control. House is on fire. Border control. Too much food. Border control. Like,
Right.
It's their
and
go-to.
Marty's, stuck
Molesting
in time. Molest my mom. What? Why? Why is that an option?
Allow someone else to molest my mom.
Here's the thing. This movie does such a good job of building up Lorraine as a character who is sheltered and quiet and, presenting herself as this mother who never was a misbehaving woman. He has no reason to suspect.
Well, she was
That
an
she-
alcoholic though.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
what was she struggling with that she was an alcoholic?
but he has no. Well, and that actually I think, yeah, that is a can of worms that you could open up with Biff and George
Right.
and their
Right.
relationship, which I think is there on purpose
Mhm.
at the beginning of the movie, but you don't know it until later. And that's
Again,
sad.
foreshadowing.
Very sad. And she feels great at the end of the other movie, so by saving her, that's the, yeah, gross. But anyway, so that part works. I like the alcoholic her at the beginning because it presents this dark vision of like
Yeah.
what would have happened, with George and Biff and Lorraine, the say hi to your mom for me thing. Like clearly
Yeah,
something
yeah.
had happened, and it's presented in a way that you can show your kids. It's
Mhm.
presented in a way that works, but isn't too gross.
But see,
I'm
that's
fine
the
with
funny
that.
thing. I watched it with my kids, and when we got to right before the dance, I looked at my wife and I said, maybe we should pause it for a second. And then I talked to her. I was like, how do we explain date rape?
Yeah.
Including date raping your own mother. Like I remember where she's like screaming. He's basically trying to rape her in the car when George opens the door. Because Marty told him to look for a struggle. But when
God, he did. He told him, "Hey,
he said,
when I'm
"There's gonna
doing
be a
Plan
struggle."
A, you come in and you no,
Yeah.
Marty, no."
and poor George is like, should I swear? And he's like, yes. Christ, George, swear. Like
Right.
he's just like, we're gonna get this done. I'm gonna make sure that there's a struggle. Now he never really implies that he's gonna do anything molesting wise.
Well, but George says, "So you're going to
To
touch her on her."
And he said no. So we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He wanted to just make sure there was some kind of a struggle. He didn't realize his mother was the one that was going to throw herself at him.
Okay, so I'm going to be devil's advocate here. You're Marty, right? You're 17 years old, right? And all you know of your mother is that she's a total stiff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's all you know for 17 years. Now, we're watching the movie as a third person watching the movie, and when he goes back and it's you know what happens.
Right.
The first thing, the interaction is we think, third party looking from afar, oh, she's not the way Marty thinks she is. Like, immediately we know it,
It's purposely done, right?
But he's still Marty. He still thinks of his mom that way. She was born a nun.
Right.
So there is that.
I don't think he had any intention of doing anything with her.
No, I don't. I think my problem is they don't do enough to explain what the plan is.
Right.
But they cut right to George being like, "You're gonna touch her on her," and he needs to say, "You needed a more specific answer from Marty there about like, no, I'm just gonna tell her something really foul, or I'm just gonna mention my dating history, or
right.
I'm gonna do something that will make this." And then if you set it up like that, right, then you have this wonderful moment where she takes a drink and he's just like, "Uh-oh, my plan's not gonna work. Now what do I do?"
Yeah, she's
right?
racing.
You introduce chaos, but instead of introducing chaos in this, you leave it at mom touching, and I'm not okay with that.
I had more of a problem with, again, sitting watching it with my kids, a problem with the lunchroom scene when Biff is like, "You know what you want, and I'm going to give it to you." That kind of, it was so, like, for a PG movie, I know it's like 85 PG.
Yeah.
So it's a little different. But just to hear those words, you you want it, and I'm going to give it to you.
Yeah.
It might as well just said, long and hard. Like, it was just so inappropriate.
It's supposed to be.
For the
but
50s.
it really builds that character,
But it builds
man.
the character,
Yeah,
absolutely.
sure
You got to
does.
build a character.
So I think the thing with Lorraine is I don't think I want to give her the benefit of the doubt as well. I think she was more of a front than anything. I think she was kind of trying to do what she thought Marty wanted her to do.
I think you're giving her too much credit.
Am I?
Because
Okay.
that undercuts her as a surprising character.
Okay.
What
Yeah.
that would do, instead, that would reinforce her as this passive, and then it wouldn't be a surprise to him, right?
Right.
The whole the effect and like the value of that scene for the movie is that, oh God, she was a teenager just like me once, and
Mhm.
something happened between now and the 80s that made her the way she is, or at least made her think that she had to present herself
Right.
in that way.
I think because I've known girls both ways. Like, I've known girls that were willing to be what they thought you want them to be, and then once it gets down to it, their true colors show, and you realize, oh shoot, nothing was ever going to happen, and that's good because that's what I was looking for. But it's like some people are, like you said, maybe she is that racy, and she was just ready to go. Either way, it does help the plot along.
Yeah. No, I
Well-
mean it doesn't drag.
No, that's for sure. The other thing I was gonna say about that is I hear what you're saying. Like, I'm thinking of it practical, like from a practical standpoint. Like, you're saying Marty, this is Marty's plan A, right?
Right.
Yeah, you I don't know. Yeah, that's not plan A. I agree with you, Dan.
It
But-
makes me love that first scene even more now that I've talked to Dan, because it's so uncomfortable, but it's just so chock full of foreshadowing.
Mhm.
And like that when he says there, "What are you looking at, butthead?" And then he follows it, "Say hello to your mom for me." And it was so loaded, but you have no idea why it's loaded.
Yep.
I
Yeah.
know why it's loaded because I've seen it like 150 times.
Mhm.
But when you watch it for the first time, now that you know the whole story, you're gonna watch this movie with a keen eye on the details,
Mhm.
and you'll realize how heavy a lot of these lines are. It's just that whole dynamic between George and Biff in the beginning, and then they do the same thing in the diner, but it's not about work files. It's about homework. Now, my dad has told me stories where he had girls do his homework, or he had people like that was a thing back then. People paid other people to do their homework.
You're gonna get your dad canceled, man.
I love my dad, but yeah, he's a little old school. But when he tells me those stories, and then I watch that movie, I'm like, okay, yeah, I can see these people. And then I realized I went to school with people like this, but it was just different. They weren't doing each other's homework,
Yeah.
but they had money schemes going on. They were doing this and that. But yeah, that whole dynamic, the McFly, he's banging on his head, and then he's like, "Oh, your shoes untied." Like it's so
It's the same
cliche.
exact thing, yeah.
It's so cliche bully, but there's so much more there
Right.
than cliche, and you have to watch the whole movie to know why it's so heavy.
Right. I'll tell you what, when he sat down, like as soon as you realize that he's sitting down next to his dad in the diner, I was like, "Get the F out of there, dude!" Like,
Yeah,
you
don't
cannot,
ruin
you
it.
cannot be talking to your dad, bro.
Right,
Like,
you already
get
became Doc
out
Brown.
Of there. No,
Marty!
seriously. Well, I mean, I don't know how much people talked about time travel in 1985, but there have been enough movies about this going wrong, and that's how it goes wrong.
This is one of the first.
You have to understand, George, the reason everybody knows that is a bad thing is because of this movie.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Is this the first time we've ever addressed this time traveling issue where you could change the... Is this the first time?
This is one of the first times where, like, this is the example. When everybody brings up time travel, they always bring up this movie.
Well, I'm going to have to Google that.
Yeah. It's
not...
not
Well, but really, for the sake of this, this remedial film class, there's a difference between the earliest example and the earliest example that caught on in the mainstream.
right.
And I'm having trouble thinking of a movie that hit the mainstream as hard as Back to the Future did, as far as like our understanding of time travel. It's
Right.
the Night
So-
of the Living Dead of time travel, which you'll have to watch at some point.
So, in a sense, my opinion or my knowledge of time travel or my knowledge of what you should do when you're time traveling was affected by this movie that I had never seen.
Yes.
Yes. You were hearing the echoes of our conversations about this movie.
Yes.
There's so many references. And what's funny is if you get around to seeing the Avengers movies, they make reference to Back to the Future because it's kind of a time heist in a way, kind of mentality in the movie, the plot. And they quickly tell you, this ain't Back to the Future. Like the characters say that.
Right.
What you know is not what it is. And then they take over the new way of talking about alternate, timelines and broken timelines and this and that. And then it kind of gets away from your idea of time travel being screwed up and never, like in their mind in Back to the Future, your actions affect your future. And that's it. Now they're trying to say in movies, it just creates an alternate timeline.
That are like parallel.
Right. So they've now taken the idea of Back to the Future or Quantum Leap or whatever, and they've changed it to their idea of what time travel is. Now, that might be more accurate because it's been 35 years.
Right.
But I'm not sure on the science.
Also, real talk here, real life time travel. Do you think that the reason why we've never been visited by a time traveler from the future is because once time travel is invented, we know not to go back?
Possible.
You know what I just thought of? Like, even if you time travel to the future, you can still screw things up after, like the future after the future that you go to. But that's...
Watch the sequel.
But here's the thing, George, the future after the future wasn't actually the future. It was just a projected future, right? So did you mess it up or did you set it right?
Right. But, well, that's relative. But
right.
Is it though, man?
But what I'm thinking is, even if like you go to the future and you screw up the future, it's like, if you're far enough in the future, like who cares? You're not alive. And that's like exactly our mentality nowadays anyway. So I can definitely see that happening.
Hey, Dan. A date just popped in my head.
Okay.
1984, which is when Terminator came out. So
I thought that was when the telescreen was invented.
Jim Cameron tackled time travel.
You never read that book, did
before.
you?
Probably
Even though
not.
I bought it for
Probably
you.
not.
The original Terminator, though,
Probably not. I don't know. No.
did it mess at all with the parallel timelines, or was the first one? I mean, we shouldn't talk about it, right? Because George, you've not seen the Terminator.
Have you seen the original Terminator?
I think you showed me
It's something
Terminator
we
a
should
very
watch.
long time ago. I don't.
But my recollection is that the original Terminator, I haven't seen it in a while. The original Terminator deals with time travel in like a linear sense. but
Okay.
that it's not until Terminator 2 that you end up with these kind of Judgment Day, alternate future, did it happen, won't it happen, did we prevent it? And of course, by the time Terminator 2 is out, I think all of the Back to the Future movies have been completed.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's like a 10-year span there. But 84, they can't talk about the changing of the future by their events because it hasn't happened yet. So when that movie, so I guess they tackled time travel before Back to the Future, but
Well,
we
time
kinda,
travel's been, I mean,
Yeah.
going back to the 30s, and then I think in literature back to, at least the 1700s. But it never hit until, I mean, the
Back to the
rules were
Future.
established by Back to the Future,
Right.
as far as I can tell from my impression of people our age and younger and older,
Mhm.
and dead and not yet born. Back to the Future.
So I can get behind your problem with the movie. I was a little nervous when you said that you had a problem. That's understandable. My
No.
problem, again, like I said, was more of the social issues of date rape and this and that, like how they tackled it in a family movie.
Yeah, there's other ways to get those two together at the dance, and my first idea is one of them, where it's like, no, convince her to ask him out,
Mhm.
right? Figure out some way to do that, and then it doesn't have to be so extreme or happen on the night of the dance. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
you can just be a jerk to her, like plan it. Listen, I'm gonna be a jerk to this chick, and you're gonna
Save the day. Come
right,
in and save the day.
and
right.
we're gonna do this like through the entire week, and then you're gonna ask her to dance.
Right.
She's gonna say yes.
Which I think the only thing keeping that is they wanted to show her as a non-prude. So I think that's why they went that route. They wanted to show how different she is when he gets back to the future,
Mm-hmm.
how much he affected both of them and their behavior. She's no longer an alcoholic. They're both in love.
Right.
They're not in love because they have to be. They're in love because they love each other, which is a
And
lot
also,
better.
he's not a pushover, so he's much more successful
Right.
than he was originally.
Yeah, the way that this movie actually manages, and I guess it's just all Bob Gale and Bob Zemeckis, the way that every character has not only an arc, but like a set amount of progress through their arc. You know, they don't
Mhm.
just perform tasks, but they also all grow in front of our eyes. But then in the end, none of it matters because of that certain twist ending, you know, and
Right.
now everything's changed again. Like, you know, you have this nice sense of satisfaction that's just like ripped away because now we got to do something else. Like, it's really good. We didn't touch on enough, just for Lorraine's sake, the idea of her as like this, you know, Nurse Nightingale kind of person who, you know, part of her connection is not just that she's boy crazy, but also that she got to care for George when he fell out of the tree, and now Marty, and what a big
Right.
component that is in her attraction to them. Like, you can't undersell that because they lean on that pretty heavy for why Marty wouldn't be able to just say, hey, listen, I've got a girlfriend back home and I'm not interested. So here's George. He's just as handsome. You know,
Right.
Yeah.
she's attached to Marty from the jump because of that fall and her ability to like see him so vulnerable and all
Right.
that stuff.
Well, what's cool is that, like I said before, they show in the very beginning how they're really not in love. And the reason why they're together, and all the kids are kind of like rolling their eyes when they tell the story, you know, yeah, Grandpa hit him with the car. And
Yeah.
it's like,
so good.
so you can tell that they tell the story with the same passion that their parents have for each other.
But with the fact that now George actually stands up
Stood
to
up
a
for her,
bully for
right.
her, or
She
stands
fell
up to
in love
a
with him.
exactly. And
So the love is real. It's not
Well-
Nightingale
well, and
anymore.
not
It's-
only not what she fell in love. She fell in love with him anyway.
Right.
Like she was, and but the difference was that George didn't just go along with it because he was a pushover. Like, he wanted it, and he like actually did something to get it.
Right.
And
you
it
can
was
tell her
his-
enamored. She was like just enamored with him in a different way than a Nightingale.
Well, I think she's enamored with him. Period.
Right.
And he's the one that's watching TV and not paying attention.
Well, but I think we also,
In the
I mean,
beginning.
something else you could dive into here is by having George be the hero in, like, you know, 1955B or whatever we're at that point.
Yeah.
She is no longer receiving like a husband from her dad who hit a guy with a car, right?
Right.
Exactly.
She's not being gifted someone. She's actually
Yeah.
reaching for
Yep.
this brass ring. It's
Yeah.
a heck of a movie, dude. It's
Yeah.
yeah,
Very well
it really
written.
is.
It's very
So
well
good.
written.
Yeah.
they don't make them like this anymore.
Yeah.
Do we talk about some of the gems? Like
Sure.
When you watch it again, I was just pointing this out to my boys. There's so many things that when you see them happen in the movie and then you know what's coming, it makes more sense. Like when he landed in 1955 and he's in the barn, they purposely in the beginning, even with like news clips and newspaper clippings, they show you everything you need to know. So you find out very early, they say stuff like Peabody's farm, and then you find out that's where the mall is built on Peabody Farm land.
Yeah.
They built the mall there when it was called the Twin Pines Mall.
Yep.
They show you that sign when he runs up to meet with Doc, and the sign says Twin Pines Mall. When he leaves the barn in 1955, he takes out one of the trees. So when you get Back to the Future,
that
and
tree's
he runs,
not there.
Tree's not there. So when
That's crazy.
when he runs up to the mall,
Yeah.
and he just gets there in time to watch Doc get shot. He runs past the sign, and it says single. I think it's
like
One Pine.
I think it's Lone Pine Mall.
Lone Pine Mall. So
I
like
didn't
that
notice
kind of stuff, they purposely said, okay, we're going to show everything that Marty affected.
Yeah, and you know what? I also thought when 1985 Marty in the yellow suit was driving the DeLorean around, I also thought, I hope when I watch this movie again, I'm going to see like the just got back from 1955 Marty standing on the corner through the window.
Right.
Like,
I wonder if they did that because I never looked for that.
I don't know, but like after watching the movie, I thought that.
Right.
I was like, I wonder if they did that and I just didn't catch it.
That's a special kind of awesome if that's there. I will
I
go
don't
and
know
watch
if
it
it,
again
I don't know
just
if
for
it is
that,
or not.
because that means some serious thought went into that.
Yeah.
If they went back and put Marty up on the curb,
Yeah.
and you see him up there, I doubt.
No,
they
I don't
did,
know because I didn't
but
watch
that
it
would
a
be
second
awesome.
time. But that's what I'm going to be looking for
Right.
the second time when I watch it, stuff like that.
And when he gets to the town and he sees everything and he sees the movie theater and it says Ronald Reagan, another foreshadow to when Doc says who's the president.
Yep.
Like all these things are so there.
And I thought of that before
right.
before
You're
they
like,
said
oh,
it
he's
too.
president in the
And
future.
I saw it on the sign and I was like, oh shoot, it's 85 he came from. He's president.
Yeah.
And he's on the
And it's a
sign.
joke.
Like I was like, oh, I just
But it's
and
true.
then when it comes up, he's like, who's the president? It's like Ronald Reagan. Ah, ha, ha. Like I was like, I knew that was gonna be something. Yeah.
So I just love all those little details. So you can still watch it 5 or 6 times, and you find new things.
Well, and it's one of those things that's going to tie the movie to the 80s forever because nobody going back 30 years from 2020 would laugh at the... Never mind. So, George, here's the thing. We're going to make you watch a different movie for next week's film class.
Yeah, well, yeah, you have to give me
We're not going to let you just watch the trilogy and just enjoy that feeling for 2 more movies, but I'll tell you, in your free time, for some extra credit, you really ought to watch the other 2 movies. They are all made with that same amount of heart and that same craftsmanship, and they tie into each other in ways that, like, think of how much you've seen in this first movie. You have that much interconnection between all 3 movies, and you don't even know it yet.
Right.
Like, they were setting stuff up for you already, man.
Yeah, it's almost
so
like
good.
it's almost like a George Lucas trilogy type thing where you watch it and everybody's like, oh, he had no idea. But then when you watch the 3rd movie and you see tie-ins to the first movie, like it was all thought out and planned out because they filmed both at the very same, just like Lord of the Rings, they filmed the exact same time and then they put them out a year away from each other.
Right.
But there's just so many references, even in the second one, to the first one that I would even watch the first one a couple times before you watch 2. That way you can really savor all the nuggets that they put in there for you.
What's really crazy is, like, you aren't ready to watch 2 yet because you don't know 1 well enough. But once you watch 2, you've got to watch 1 again because you're going to learn 1 even better having seen 2. And then you got to do it all over again for 3, man. It's a heck of a trilogy.
It's genius.
It's a different kind of thing from, like, because I'm a big Dark Knight fan. I loved all 3 of those movies. And each one was made like, well, we probably only going to do this one, so let's put it all in this one. Okay, we're going to do the second one. It's probably our last one. Let's put it all in here. And it benefited those movies in certain ways. But it's just, you can't touch that interconnectivity of the Back to the Future saga.
Absolutely.
For sure.
I agree 100%. So maybe you have not watched your favorite movie of all time, but maybe over time?
No, probably not my favorite movie of all time. Yeah, no pun intended. But yeah, that just slipped out. I didn't mean to say that. But I am more of like a real life kind of guy. Like I like a good tragedy, like
Right.
Or
thriller.
But
speaking of thrillers, did you see the other reference in the movie? Now, I don't think you might have noticed it because your age, but the judge at the audition for Marty,
Oh, this is excellent. Yes. Yeah, he's too darn loud.
he's
that
too
guy.
darn loud. Yeah, the guy at the beginning was like, "Thank you."
I remember the guy. Yeah, tell me.
That was
what
Huey Lewis,
Okay.
and
So
Huey
good.
Lewis is the writer of all the music in the movie.
Okay.
Including the song that Marty
including-
just shredded
right.
out on stage.
He just played a Huey Lewis in the news song
right.
in front of Huey Lewis, and Huey Lewis told him, "Thank
no,
you."
No,
It's too loud.
I'm afraid you're just too darn
No.
loud.
That
darn
went over
loud.
my head too. Sorry.
So
Yeah.
See, that's something for you to pick up on second watch.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't even know if you would even recognize him because he hasn't really been
No,
relevant.
I
other
probably
than,
wouldn't recognize his face.
Right.
You're right.
Well, recently he's been in the news because I think it is either his hearing's going
Well, that's a shame.
or something in his throat. So he's
They were
been
just too darn
retired.
loud. Just too
Yeah,
darn loud.
They were
Too
just
darn
too
loud.
darn loud. Yeah.
Should have taken his own advice. Just kidding. Love you.
Listen,
Huey.
there's
So
nothing loud.
what other things did this movie foreshadow in real life, other than Huey Lewis?
Well, we haven't
losing his
gotten to
hearing?
part 2 yet, man.
Yeah, there's some stuff in part 2 that is pretty genius and foreshadows.
And some of it will make your heart hurt a little bit. Just so bad.
Can we discuss how awesome? I forget his name in real life, but when you look at the 3 movies, you'll see what I'm talking about. The guy who plays Biff.
Oh, Thomas Wilson. Yes.
Just
so wonderful.
Thomas Wilson, yeah. Just his ability to be Biff at all ages and never fall out of character and be an asshole in every aspect of age group and time periods. Like, it's just, he's playing different characters, but they're all the same
Yeah.
character,
Yeah.
almost to the point where they're saying the same things.
Yeah.
Make like a tree and get out of here line
So good.
is so good. But he has a bunch of other ones that come up later, and then you get to see him as an old guy. Like, I'm not going to give it
All
away
right.
for you, but it's great how they tie the 3 movies together, but mostly 1 and 2.
Okay.
You get to really see the genius that is Biff.
Well, and if you want more extra credit, George, for this curriculum we're running, there's a slasher movie called April Fool's Day. Don't watch it yet. You're not ready. But when
Okay.
we get there, he plays a completely different character in the movie.
Okay.
And you realize right away that this movie is made back to back with Back to the Future. And this
Mhm.
guy is just that good of an actor that he convinces you he is that guy. Just like,
Nice.
what's his name on Friends? Joey, right?
Joe,
That
yeah.
he's dumb as a box of hammers, and that has hampered that actor's career because everybody thinks he really is that dumb.
Right.
Same thing. Everybody thinks he is Biff, to the point that you can actually find there's a song by Thomas Wilson, Biff's question song, and it's just basically him answering all the same questions that everyone has asked him for 30 years
Wow.
in a song, and I highly recommend it.
All right, I'll check that out.
I met him at a con, and he's a really nice guy.
So, what's my? I mean, obviously, this
Well,
is we're coming to the end of class, right?
Let's
Yeah.
not put the cart before the horse now,
The
George.
bell's about to ring.
I just have to ask you,
Yes.
do you feel like, having watched Back to the Future in this kind of like forced setting, right, at gunpoint, essentially,
Yeah.
2 things. Do you feel like we picked you a good movie?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and then the other thing.
Yeah.
Do you feel like after one movie that you are a better movie watcher than you were before, having been like forced to concentrate on the film itself and not the world around you while you watch it?
That's a loaded question.
Yeah, I was kind of aware of that already. I was pretty aware of that because, we would have conversations and, have you seen this or that? And a lot of the times I would say, yeah, but not really. I mean, I wasn't really paying attention to it. That's something that I know about myself.
So you knew you had to pay attention because we were
Yeah.
going to talk about it.
Yeah, so I guess to answer that question is, am I a better movie watcher? Yes, but I knew I had to be. I knew I had to work on that, so.
I think it's a lot like listening to an album versus listening to a playlist on Spotify. It's a different skill. It's very similar in
Yeah.
execution, but it is a different skill. And hopefully we can foster that in you a little bit to where maybe, by the 3rd or 4th or 25th movie, you'll be able to kind of enter that mode where it is just you and the movie and the world is gone for a little bit.
Yep.
It adds a lot of value, not only to your attention span to the movie, but it also just it's better for you to get away.
Maybe that's why I never really watched a lot of movies, because I never let myself get taken away like you guys did.
Well, hopefully you get to a point where you're watching the movie, but you're also starting to see, because it is a film class, George. It's a film class.
Of course.
So you
Very
start,
serious business.
You start picking up on the plot lines and the character development, and it becomes part of your review. Where it's not so much, well, this movie made me feel good or made me feel bad or this or that. You start talking about I don't think we need to get into like cinematography and all that stuff, but just plot lines and I love character development and foreshadowing and just the techniques that are used to storytell.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what you're going to come away with, is because I'll sit and I'll watch a movie and not think of any of that stuff. But as someone who's done acting and done some directing, not film wise, but directing.
Yeah.
Bedroom stuff mostly.
Yeah, bedroom stuff. Shh. My wife is gonna listen to this.
No, she's
no, she's not.
She's gonna say, seriously?
I'm not watching that. I have too many things to do. Yeah, you're gonna start picking up on the stuff that they do talk about in film class, and you're gonna, while you're watching the movie, you're going, oh my god, I'm worrying about character development. And then you start watching things and you're like, all right, that was lazy, or that was genius. And then you're not just watching it for fun, you're watching it to learn something. And then you start learning stuff by certain directors and certain
Let me
filmmakers.
ask you guys a question. Does anything in movies surprise you anymore?
You know what? I'm going to answer this. I watched one the other day, The Corruption of Chris Miller. Right? It's a Spanish giallo, for those of you who like to talk about nerdy things like that. And
all three of you out there that are
something happened in that movie that I can't talk about, but there is a certain predetermined twist, and it should not have landed because it should have been easy to predict. But the director was so good at keeping me, basically it was the sleight of hand, right? He kept me so busy, even though I've seen 1,000 giallos, kept me looking at his moving, distracting hand, that I didn't see him pointing at this very obvious twist. And so when the twist happened for the first time in probably 30 movies, 40 movies, 50 movies, in a long time, I went, oh, you got me, which is a great feeling, having seen every movie in that genre.
So
still
it does
every now and then,
just less often.
There's that feeling. There it is again.
My issue is I watch, ever since I saw The Sixth Sense, which you have seen, right?
That's one that I wasn't sober for, yes.
Okay, so after seeing The Sixth Sense,
we can talk about Sixth Sense. I know what happens.
That movie made me start paying attention more, because I was mad at myself that I didn't catch it right away. And I'm so good at figuring out who the murderer is or who this is, and then I'll lean over to Jen like halfway through the movie and I'm like, that's the bad guy. Another
Shyamalan movie did that for me.
What was that?
Unbreakable.
Yes, Unbreakable.
And I remember the scene. It was when they were in the shop, and what's his name?
Sam Jackson.
Yes, he's explaining how the villain has exaggerated features, and and I'm looking at him standing there, and I'm like, he has a huge head.
Yeah, he's a superhero.
Like he's got a really skinny, and he's also the exact opposite of the hero. I was like, he's got the, the frail bones, and I'm like, it was that moment where I was like. Same director. I was like, oh. And
what ruins it is, for me, now every time I watch a Shyamalan movie, I'm looking for the twist the whole time.
Yeah.
And then when the twist doesn't happen, the movie that was in my head was better than the movie I watched.
Yeah.
And that happened twice.
Shyamalan is a really interesting case because he did serve the twist for so many movies.
Mm-hmm.
But he did so in such a way that the movie had no rewatchability. Like, he oversold the twist.
Right.
He over-relied on the twist to the point that you can't watch Sixth Sense again without being like, oh, yeah, well, because he's,
Right.
Or like Signs.
It's good to watch a second time.
You can watch it a second time just to
catch all the references.
Just to be aware of how blind you were.
Right. And they do that to you at the end of the movie. They show you everything you missed.
Yeah.
And And then when I watched Unbreakable, I watched it differently, and that's a movie you can watch over and over again. I watched it differently because I knew from the beginning that the twist wasn't that Sam Jackson Glass was the villain.
Mm-hmm.
There was no twist in that movie, to me, personally.
Yeah.
It was just a real way to tell a story, a superhero comic book movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it was before, I believe it was before Singer did X-Men, and it was definitely before Nolan did Batman.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like one of the first times where someone really kind of attempted to show superheroes in real life.
Can I tell you, Trev? I watched that movie not knowing it was a superhero movie.
Okay.
Yeah, the marketing
Until
at the time was that it was just the new movie from Shyamalan. So for me, the twist was, oh, and it's a superhero movie, which was a bonus because, woo.
It was great.
Yeah,
no, it was well hid.
Yeah, and when you're watching it, like even when you're watching it, you don't realize it's a superhero movie until like the last.
Because Bruce Willis plays it so well to where he just he's so ho-hum about it.
Yeah.
And he's not like, I will save you. Like he's not a superhero at all. He's in denial the whole time.
Yeah.
But
I'm going to plug it right here.
that was not a twist for me because I was watching it. So I kind of caught on to him and I was like, okay. And then I watched The Village and I'm like, all right, there's no real there is a twist, but it's not as good as I thought it was going to be.
That was terrible.
And then Signs, there was no twist at all. It was just,
terrible
they are being invaded, and they are, like, to me, I kind of caught on to him quick. But Sixth Sense, I can still watch multiple times.
Signs was terrible because, like, the things that made that made it come together in the end were, like, so obscure.
Right.
That it was like,
away.
Come on.
The twist of that movie didn't happen. In my mind, as I watched it, I thought it was, they kind of set it up this way, but it never happened. I thought it was all happening inside of Mel Gibson's head. I thought it was him dealing with his own demons. And the way they did the whole seclusion in the house. And
it wasn't. It was actual aliens.
Actual alien
and
invasion.
You actually had to hit them with water to kill them.
I would have loved it if it was all happening in his head. Somehow, twist-wise, not a lazy way to, as a twist.
By the way, this is how I act when I don't like a movie. Like, that was terrible.
Yeah.
But then Mel Gibson called that alien sugar tits and it all worked out.
Forgot about that.
As he got in the car.
So George, we've come to the end of your first lesson. Are you ready for your next lesson?
Yeah, obviously.
All right.
That's why I'm here. That's why I'm paying you money for this class.
So coming up on our next episode, we're going to be putting George through maybe the most famous thriller of all time. I don't think I'm overselling it.
No.
He's going to be watching Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. And that's all we're going to say about it because we don't want George to have any kind of preconceived notions about what he's about to get himself into.
And you definitely have not seen Psycho. You have not seen any of the sequels, nothing.
No.
Prequels, nothing. Okay, good.
I didn't know there was a movie called Psycho.
What?
I've seen I've seen American Psycho. I know
Totally
that's not the same thing.
Okay, definitely a different thing. Don't let that movie cloud your expectations for the actual movie called Psycho. From 1960, directed by Alfred Hitchcock and starring as my college professor called him, Tony Perkins. They were close.
Oh wow.
They weren't close. He just called him Tony Perkins for some reason.
It's like calling De Niro Bobby. You know?
See, my friend had a professor that would refer to his first wife all the time, and then one time, his wife came to the class to like drop something off to him, and he's like, "Oh, this is my first wife," and she's like, "I'm your only wife." He's like, "Well, still my first."
Technically, I mean, he's not wrong.
No, he's not.
Well, George,
I'm
Travis,
excited about this.
Thank you for joining us in the Remedial Film Class podcast. You can find us online at Twitter and Instagram at Remedial Film Pod. You can also find us at facebook.com/Remedial Film Pod. And of course, email us at remedialfilmpod@gmail.com.